Okay, so I just finished talking to you about Kylo v. United States. So now we're going to move on just a little bit to the reasonable expectation of privacy. And this actually comes to us from the Supreme Court case of Katz v. United States. Katz v. United States is a major landmark case. You will want to look this one up and read the syllabus of the court and the ruling. Okay, so in this situation, Mr. Katz was using a telephone booth, which I know most of you are probably not familiar with anymore. But Superman changed in them, but they are very, very small, and they have a payphone in them. Um, and it's a very small booth. I mean, we're talking maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, very, very small. But it does have a door that slides closed on it, similar to the door on a school bus. Um, and whenever the door closes, there's kind of a little bit of a seal. You can still, like, if you stick your ear up to the glass of the phone booth, you can hear what they're saying. But by closing the door, just the average passerby on the street is not going to be able to hear the conversation going on inside of the booth. Well, once again, some enterprising young law enforcement officers put a listening device on the telephone booth, um, and they obtained information about what was going on. And of course, they go to trial and they use the information they obtained from their listening device at trial. And Katz objected, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court gave us a couple of definitions and a couple of new legal precepts that have kind of shaped the way that we do criminal procedure in this country. But one of the things that was argued in Katz is that the government argued that because it was a public telephone booth with a public payphone, there was no expectation of privacy under the Fourth Amendment. And the attorneys for Katz argued the opposite, saying that no, he was inside of a telephone booth. He had taken reasonable efforts to use an enclosed payphone rather than just one along the street or in a bank of payphones. That he had indeed closed the door. And so he had taken reasonable measures to ensure some manner of privacy. And so from this, the Supreme Court gives us the terms actual expectation of privacy and objectively reasonable. Two separate terms there. But the actual expectation of privacy basically tells us that the Fourth Amendment does not necessarily apply to one's property, but to the person themselves. The person has the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures in their person, places of their residence, their effects, things like that. So it's the person who retains the Fourth Amendment right, not the place. And so the Fourth Amendment protects one's expectation of privacy. And this is something that you'll find that goes back and forth quite a bit, and Katz is referred to in a lot of arguments in the Supreme Court over expectations of privacy. But basically, the thing is here Katz took reasonable efforts to ensure some level of an expectation of privacy, and his level of expectation of privacy was that he expected his phone conversation to be private between him and the person he was talking to. And the Supreme Court said that that was an objectively reasonable expectation of privacy, and therefore to intrude upon that expectation of privacy required a search warrant to be issued under the Fourth Amendment. Now, it's also important to understand what objectively reasonable means. Okay, objectively reasonable means that it has to be what multiple other people would believe is reasonable. Okay, so if you want a private phone conversation on your cell phone, you would step out of my classroom and into the hallway where there is much less people around to hear your conversation. And you would lower the tone of your voice and kind of tuck in a little bit. And so there you've taken reasonable steps that other people would find to be reasonable to ensure some manner of an expectation of privacy to your phone conversation. So that's the thing, is it's not necessarily what you believe is reasonable, but what other people would believe is reasonable given the circumstances. Okay, so then we come on here to United States v. Jacobson. And this is another important case because here the court gives us the definition of a search and the definition of a seizure, which you can see there. A search is privacy which society accepts as reasonable has been breached. Okay, so taking the situation of Katz there in the telephone booth, society believes that whenever you step into the phone, close the phone booth door, you have ensured some manner of an expectation of privacy. And society believes that that's reasonable. And if we intrude upon what society believes is a reasonable expectation of privacy, it's a search under the Fourth Amendment. And if it is an unreasonable search, then it has to be done under the authority of a search warrant. Okay. And then we also have a seizure, which is a meaningful interference in a person's possessory interests. Okay, I recently had a criminal case that I was working in which I took someone's cell phone away from them and logged it into evidence. Now, I did so with the intention of obtaining a search warrant to search the phone, but I have seized the phone in plain view as it is contains evidence of the crime, or at least in that instance, there was reason to believe that there were text messages, emails, perhaps photographs on the phone that would be evidence in the case against the defendant. And so I took their phone from them. It was in plain view. I seized their phone, but then in order to search the phone, I had to obtain a search warrant, which I did. And then I searched the phone. And as soon as I finished searching the phone, I completed a release authorization for the phone and authorized the phone to be released back to the defendant. Okay, so here we come to the definition of probable cause. And this one's going to take a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this video and start another one for you, okay?